What do we know about Ishmael from the Bible? Ishmael was Abraham's firstborn son, often lives in the shadow of his brother Isaac. Yet, his tale is tightly intertwined with the Bible's fabric, showcasing themes of belief, hardship, and God's guidance. From his extraordinary birth to his role as the forefather of a mighty nation, Ishmael's life exemplifies God's faithfulness and the complexities of human connections. This video explores Ishmael's journey, shedding light on his crucial but overlooked part in the story of Abraham's descendants. Come with us as we reveal the narrative of Ishmael, the forgotten son of Abraham. The tale of Ishmael commences with his father, Abraham, originally known as Abram. Abram resided in Ur of the Chaldeans, a flourishing city in ancient Mesopotamia. Despite the prosperity, God called Abram to leave his homeland for an unknown land, promising him a great nation. This divine instruction is recorded in Genesis, chapter 12, verses 1 to 3, where God instructs Abram, "Leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you." Abram, along with his wife Sarai and nephew Lot, heeded God's call and embarked on this journey of faith, traveling to Canaan. After arriving in the new land, God reaffirmed his promise to Abram, declaring, "This land will belong to your descendants." Genesis chapter 12, verse 7. Despite this assurance, Abram and Sarai encountered a major obstacle. They had no children, and Sarai could not conceive. This made the idea of having many descendants, as promised by God, seem impossible. As time went by and Sarai remained childless, she began to question whether God's promise would ever come true. Feeling desperate and following the customs of their time, Sarai, who had an Egyptian maidservant whose name was Hagar. So Sarai said to Abraham, "See now, the Lord has restrained me from bearing children. Please go into my maid. Perhaps I shall obtain children by her." And Abraham heeded the voice of Sarai. Then Sarai, Abraham's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, and gave her to her husband Abraham to be his wife. After Abraham had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, he went into Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress became despised in her eyes. Then Sarai said to Abraham, "My wrong be upon you. I gave my maid into your arms, and when she saw that she had conceived, I became despised in her eyes. The Lord judge between you and me." So Abraham said to Sarai, "Indeed, your maid is in your hand. Do to her as you please." And when Sarai dealt harshly with her, she fled from her presence. Now the angel of the Lord found Hagar by a spring of water in the wilderness, by the spring on the way to Shur. And he said, "Hagar, Sarai's maid, where have you come from, and where are you going?" She said, "I am fleeing from the presence of my mistress Sarai." The angel of the Lord said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit yourself under her hand." Then the angel of the Lord said to her, "I will multiply your descendants exceedingly, so that they shall not be counted for multitude." And the angel of the Lord said to her, "Behold, you are with child, and you shall bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your affliction. He shall be a wild man. His hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him, and he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren." Then she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, "You are the God who sees," for she said, "Have I also here seen him who sees me?" Therefore the well was called Beer Lahai Roi. Observe, it is between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar bore Abraham a son, and Abraham named his son Ishmael, means God will hear, God hears, God heard, or may God hear, Genesis 16. Abraham was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abraham. It was common in ancient times for a barren wife to present her husband with a slave woman who would bear children for her. The woman, not the slave, was to be in charge of the children. Childless Sarah obtained a son by Hagar, and Ishmael was legally the child of Sarah. This does not explain Sarah's treatment of Hagar. Genesis 17, when Abraham was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abraham and said to him, "I am Almighty God. Walk before me and be blameless, and I will make my covenant between me and you. I will multiply you exceedingly." Then Abraham fell on his face, and God talked with him, saying, "As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall be a father of many nations. No longer shall your name be called Abram, but your name shall be Abraham, for I have made you a father of many nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you. Kings shall come from you, and I will establish my covenant between me and you and your descendants after you and their generations for an everlasting covenant to be God to you and your descendants after you. Also, I give to you and your descendants after you the land in which you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan, an everlasting possession, and I will be their God." And God said to Abraham, "As for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your descendants after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised, and you shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskins. It shall be a sign of the covenant between me and you. He who is 8 days old among you shall be circumcised, every male child in your generations, whether born in your house or bought with money from any foreigner who is not your descendant. He who is born in your house, he who is bought with your money, must be circumcised, and my covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. And the uncircumcised male child who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, that person shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant." Then God said to Abraham, "As for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but Sarah shall be her name. And I will bless her, and also give you a son by her. Then I will bless her, and she shall be a mother of nations. Kings of peoples shall be from her." Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said in his heart, "Shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? And shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child?" And Abraham said to God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before you." Then God said, "No, Sarah, your wife shall bear you a son, and you shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant, and with his descendants after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. He shall beget 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah shall bear to you at this set time next year." Then he finished talking with him, and God went up from Abraham. So Abraham took Ishmael, his son, all who were born in his house, and all who were bought with his money, every male among the men of Abraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskins that very same day, as God had said to him. Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, and Ishmael his son was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin that very same day. Abraham was circumcised, and his son Ishmael, and all the men of his house born in the house or bought with money from a foreigner, were circumcised with him. The contrast between national greatness and covenant experience reveals a lot about what the covenant really entailed. National greatness is also promised in Genesis, chapter 21, verses 13 and 18. "Yet I will also make a nation of the son of the bondwoman, because he is your seed. Arise, lift up the lad, and hold him with your hand, for I will make him a great nation." Genesis, chapter 17, verses 22 to 27, shows that the covenant is not to be identified with circumcision, no matter how much that identification may appear to be necessitated. Ishmael, despite being circumcised according to God's mandate, was not the covenant sign. Genesis chapter 17 verse 10 states, "This is my covenant, which you shall keep between me and you and your descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised." Abraham and Sarah's treatment of Ishmael regarded Ishmael as the promised son of God, even when God revealed that Sarah would bear a son. Abraham was perplexed as to why this was required rather than having Ishmael as heir. Genesis chapter 17 verse 18 records Abraham saying to God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before you, even after Isaac was born." Abraham treated Ishmael with kindness and was saddened by Sarah's wish to reject him. Sarah, on the other hand, saw Ishmael as a danger to Isaac's position in the family and sought to have him expelled. Genesis 21 narrates how the Lord visited Sarah and fulfilled the promise of giving birth to Isaac. Abraham circumcised his son Isaac when he was 8 days old, as God had commanded him. Abraham, who was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born to him, and Sarah said, "God has made me laugh, and all who hear will laugh with me." She also said, "Who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? For I have borne him a son in his old age." So the child grew and was weaned, and Abraham made a great feast on the same day that Isaac was weaned. Sarah observed the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, scoffing. Therefore she said to Abraham, "Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be here with my son," namely with Isaac. The matter was very displeasing in Abraham's sight because of his son. But God said to Abraham, "Do not let it be displeasing in your sight because of the lad, or because of your bondwoman. Whatever Sarah has said to you, listen to her voice, for in Isaac your seed shall be called. Yet I will also make a nation of the son of the bondwoman, because he is your seed." So Abraham rose early in the morning, took bread and the skin of water, and putting it on her shoulder, he gave it and the boy to Hagar and sent her away. Then she departed and wandered into the wilderness of Beersheba, and the water in the skin was used up. She placed the boy under one of the shrubs. Then she went and sat down across from him at a distance of about bowshot, for she said to herself, "Let me not see the death of the boy." So she sat opposite him and lifted her voice and wept. And God heard the voice of the lad, and the angel of God called to Hagar out of heaven and said to her, "What ails you, Hagar? Fear not, for God has heard the voice of the lad. Where he is, arise, lift up the lad, and hold him with your hand, for I will make him a great nation." Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water. She went and filled the skin with water and gave the lad a drink. So God was with the lad, and he grew and dwelt in the wilderness and became an archer. He dwelt in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. At that time Abimelech and Phicol, the commander of his army, spoke to Abraham, saying, "God is with you in all that you do. Now therefore, swear to me by God that you will not deal falsely with me, with my offspring, or with my posterity, but that according to the kindness that I have done to you, you will do to me and to the land in which you have dwelt." And Abraham said, "I will swear." Then Abraham rebuked Abimelech because of a well of water which Abimelech's servants had seized. And Abimelech said, "I do not know who has done this thing. You did not tell me, nor had I heard of it until today." So Abraham took sheep and oxen and gave them to Abimelech, and the two of them made a covenant. Abraham set 7 ewe lambs by themselves. Then Abimelech asked Abraham, "What is the meaning of these 7 ewe lambs which you have set by themselves?" And he said, "You will take these 7 ewe lambs from my hand, that they may be my witness that I have dug this well." Therefore he called that place Beersheba, because the two of them swore an oath there. Thus they made a covenant at Beersheba. Abimelech rose with Phicol, the commander of his army, and they returned to the land of the Philistines. Then Abraham planted a tamarisk tree in Beersheba, and there called on the name of the Lord, the everlasting God. Abraham stayed in the land of the Philistines many days. This request to expel the handmaid and her son seemed to violate every norm of ancient law. Children of handmaids could be demoted, but not cast out if there was a good reason. The fact that Abraham was against such treatment and followed only God's command suggests that the action taken was not in accordance with contemporary patterns. The question also must be asked whether there was something that Ishmael did that was a threat to Isaac, or whether it was his existence which constituted such a threat. Genesis chapter 21 verse 9 states, "And Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, scoffing." Whether it represents Ishmael mocking Isaac or playing with Isaac is questionable. if the word ever meant to mock or deride in the Old Testament. Judges chapter 16 verse 25. So it happened when their hearts were merry that they said, "Call for Samson, that he may perform for us." So they called for Samson from the prison, and he performed for them, and they stationed him between the pillars. Therefore, Sarah objected to Ishmael as a competitor of Isaac rather than for any specific deed he had taken. The purpose of the Ishmael sequence in Genesis. The author of Genesis provides Ishmael's story largely to contrast Isaac and Ishmael, not as individuals, but as illustrations of God's anti-work. The argument is that when God fulfilled his promises to Abraham, he was not restricted by the natural and ordinary. Example, the flesh. Although God's preference for Isaac as the son of the wife was in accord with custom, the rejection of Hagar and Ishmael served to make the contrast bolder. His descendants, the descendants of Ishmael, are given identically in two passages, Genesis and 1 Chronicles. Genesis chapter 25 verses 12 to 16 states, "Now this is the genealogy of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's maidservant, bore to Abraham. And these were the names of the sons of Ishmael, by their names, according to their generations. The firstborn of Ishmael, Nebajoth, then Kedar, Adbeel, Mibsam, Mishma, Duma, Massa, Hadar, Tema, Jetur, Naphish, and Kedema. These were the sons of Ishmael, and these were their names, by their towns and their settlements, 12 princes according to their nations." What is most surprising is that there were 12 sons counted, just as Jacob had 12 sons counted. This is to be compared to Nahor's 12 sons and Esau's 12 sons. Genesis chapter 22 verses 21 to 24. Huz's firstborn, Buz's brother, Kemuel the father of Aram, Chest, Hazo, Pildash, Jidlaph, and Bethuel. Rebekah these 8 Milcah bore to Nahor, Abraham's brother. His concubine, whose name was Reumah, also bore Tebah, Gaham, Thahash, and Maacah. Princes ruled over the Ishmaelites. Genesis chapter 25 verse 16. These Ishmaelite tribes settled in the general area where their ancestors grew up, namely, the Paran wilderness. Genesis chapter 25 verse 18 describes this region as from Havilah as far as Shur, which is opposite Egypt in the direction of Assyria. Some of his descendants' names appear as tribes in Assyrian chronicles. They dwelt from Havilah as far as Shur, which is east of Egypt as you go toward Assyria. He died in the presence of all his brethren. In accordance with God's statements concerning Ishmael, the Ishmaelites are sometimes shown as hostile to the Israelites. 1 Chronicles chapter 5 verse 19. Genesis chapter 16 verse 12 states, "He shall be a wild man. His hand shall be against every man, and every man's hand against him. And he shall dwell in the presence of all his brethren." Finally, the Ishmaelites are coupled with Mediates, some of the descendants of Keturah in some passages, thus suggesting an overlapping of the two terms. The term Ishmaelite is applied to the Mediates, and the same group receives both names in Genesis, chapter 37 verses 25 to 28, where Joseph's brothers sold him to a caravan of traitors, and in Genesis chapter 37 verse 36, 39 verse 1, where Joseph is sold to Potiphar in Egypt. There is no need to distinguish between immediate and an Ishmaelite account for Joseph's selling. Judges chapter 8 verse 24. Then Gideon said to them, "I would like to make a request to you, that each of you would give me the earrings from his plunder, for they have gold earrings, because they were Ishmaelites." Genesis chapter 37 verses 29 to 28. And they sat down to eat a meal. Then they lifted their eyes and looked, and there was a company of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels, bearing spices, balm, and myrrh, on their way to carry them down to Egypt. So Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is there if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites, and let not our hand be upon him, for he is our brother and our flesh." And his brothers listened. Then Mediates passed by. So the brothers pulled Joseph up and lifted him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 shekels of silver, and they took Joseph to Egypt. Genesis chapter 37 verse 36. Now the Mediates had sold him in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. Genesis chapter 39 verse 1. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh, captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. The Ishmael sequence is used by Paul, although he does not mention Ishmael by name. Paul clearly bases his teaching in Galatians 4 on the Genesis chapters. Ishmael was born in the flesh, and he persecuted him who was born in the spirit. Galatians chapter 4 verse 29. But as he who was born according to the flesh then persecuted him who was born according to the spirit, even so it is now. The fact that the next verse is a reference from Genesis chapter 21 verse 10 shows that Paul is thinking about the context when he makes the remark about Ishmael persecuting Isaac. Therefore she said to Abraham, "Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, namely with Isaac." As we conclude the story of Ishmael, Ishmael was born to Abraham when he was 86 years old and living near Hebron. Then Abraham moved his tent and dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, which are in Hebron, and built an altar there for the Lord. His mother was of Egyptian origin. However, God had addressed her in her dire hour of need. God made a covenant with Abraham when Ishmael was 13 years old, requiring all members of Abraham's household to be circumcised. When Abraham was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abraham and said to him, "I am Almighty God. Walk before me and be blameless." Ishmael and his mother were banished from the family several years later, after Isaac had been weaned, to wander in the wilderness around Beersheba. They were on the verge of dying of thirst when God heard the boy and gave water. Ishmael spent the rest of his life in the desert, particularly in the wilderness of Paran, with the help of God. It was here that he learned to use the bow, and his marriage to an Egyptian explains his proximity to Egypt as well as his mother's heritage. His presence at Abraham's funeral and the fact that Esau married Ishmael's daughter Mahalath demonstrates that he did not completely cut ties with the main patriarchal line. Genesis chapter 15 verse 9. And his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the field of Ephron the Hittite. Genesis chapter 28 verse 9. So Esau went to Ishmael and took Mahalath, the daughter of Ishmael, Abraham's son, the sister of Nebaioth, to be his wife, in addition to the wives he had. Ishmael lived 137 years and was gathered to his kindred. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope this video has been insightful and encouraging. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with others who have similar interests. Also, leave a comment below sharing your thoughts and any other biblical topics you'd like us to explore in future videos. Until next time, may the hope of resurrection and the assurance of God's power over death bring you comfort and strength. God bless you.